Welcome. My name is Jay Hauser. I'm a VP of Client Accounts at Fuel Cycle, so get to work with all of our wonderful clients, which is truly a joy of my job. Today, I'm going to be the host for our webinar, Redefining Member Satisfaction and How Insights Teams Are Reshaping Healthcare Insurance. Exciting stuff. You'll see on screen with me here, we've assembled a really great panel of industry experts. They're going to help us explore how insurers are transforming the member experience through three main categories we're going to talk about today: targeted engagement, transparent communication, and ultimately forward-thinking research strategies. Really what a lot of this is in service of is if you think of this as kind of a pyramid that we're building foundationally on to ultimately get to great insights. Before we start, I'll go through a few housekeeping items. First, we'll have a dedicated time for Q&A at the end. So as you have questions throughout, drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I think if this were YouTube, I would just kind of point down here, so I don't know where it is on your screen, but drop questions in there and we'll get to them towards the end. Also, a recording of today's webinar will be shared with all of you within 48 hours, so you'll have that. And then lastly, if you experience any technical difficulties throughout the webinar, feel free to send a message in the chat and our support team will assist you so we can keep you going through this. So with that, I'd like to welcome our speakers. Today we have Beth Simon from Fuel Cycle, Jeff Doms from Physicians Mutual, and Ashley Fortney from CareSource. Thank you for being with us. I'm excited to talk through this. I know you all have a lot of great insights in how you're doing this. So looking forward to getting started here. So for everyone, today we're going to discuss some of the best practices for gathering actionable feedback, building trust around plan details, and overcoming the unique challenges of healthcare research, which I think we're all well aware of what those are. So with that, we're going to get started. We're going to dive right into improving member engagement. We'll kind of go through a little bit of a round robin. I'll hand questions over to some of our panelists, and anyone who has something to jump in, please do. So Jeff, we'll probably start with you. First question. Okay, so what are the best ways, or maybe some unique ways, that your team has gathered feedback from members to better understand their needs and preferences?
Yeah, and thanks, Jay and Fuel Cycle, for having me be a part of this. I think when it comes to engaging members of our community, it's really about the setup. It's about all the stuff that you're doing prior to when you need to get information from them. So we really look at it as a continuous conversation, and we try really hard to make sure that our members know that there is something that's always going to be coming, that we're always going to be asking and engaging them in information. We try to mix in, in the insurance industry, not everything is incredibly interesting, right? Like if we want people to examine explanation of benefits, if that's all we're asking them to do over and over again, that can be, pretty tedious for them to do. So we always try to also mix in some fun things for them to do. Tell us about, what's happened around the holidays. What are some things that they're trying to do in their retirement? Have them tell us their personal stories. And we do that in a cadence where they can expect that we're going to engage with them. So right now we do, Tuesday mornings, 9 o'clock, we always try to launch something. And so we just try to develop that habit that we're always going to be asking them something so they know when to check in. And then we also make sure that we close the loop, right? So again, we want things to be continuous, back and forth. And so once they're done giving us information, especially on larger, projects where maybe we're doing a discussion board, we're also doing a poll question, we're also doing, a survey of sorts. And even if it's similar topics, but maybe something different, individually, we like to wrap that up and close the loop back to them and let them know, hey, here's what we heard. Here's what you guys are saying. Here are some things that we're going to take forward to the business based on your recommendations. And we found that that really does increase engagement, and that not only that, but that people really appreciate it. We've heard comments back from our members that they really appreciate that they feel that there is somebody on the other side, listening to this. I think it's also with the setup is one of the things that we've changed this year is we've gotten more personal with them. We've created a meet the team page. So we've actually put ourselves out there, introduced ourselves, really tried to humanize that they're not just talking into a black box, but that we are actually, listening to them, that this is an actual conversation, back and forth. And so, you know, that is probably the biggest thing that we've done over the last, 12 months or so to really make sure that we're increasing engagement. So they're there when we need them.
Yeah, yeah, Jeff, and Ashley, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But Jeff, I think what kind of struck me about your answer is that maybe in particularly for very important audiences and maybe particularly in the healthcare space, you kind of talked about really a holistic conversation and relationship as opposed to just jumping in, question with a pool of people at one point, no context and kind of move on. And that really does require a two-way street, right? To fully understand that we've got a relationship here. And I'm not trying to just understand text in this little particular document. I'm trying to understand your experience to improve it. So I love that. I mean, I know how you guys have set that up over the past year, and I think it's working really well. Ashley, do you have any thoughts on how you've been approaching it, similar or in addition to
Yeah.
what Jeff talked about?
I can tag on and say we do try to do a few very similar things. We also have a weekly cadence where we try to give the member an expectation of what's going to happen. So we do our content release every Thursday afternoon, so not Tuesday morning. So we send out a newsletter that'll give them a discussion board, usually a survey, a quick poll, and an informative article. We also do try to circle back with the members and close the loop as well. But one thing I wanted to share that's been a little unique for us the last 3 years now is we've started adding these small groups on Circle where we've created these groups that let us directly engage more frequently with members that are coming from specific backgrounds. So maybe Hispanic members, LGBTQ plus. I think we have around 12 small groups now, and these members are aware that they're going to receive a little bit more research. They'll have more surveys, more discussion boards, usually on topics related to their culture or their background. But they also are going to get a little bit more tailored content because of that as well. And that's allowed us to do a lot more really tailored research for things health equity related. It allowed us to receive our NCQA health equity accreditation, doing some of this really tailored research. And I think that it's given the members something a little more community close knit group as well, because they know every month they'll have a few discussion boards that are just within those small groups they participate in. So it just really helps them build more relationships within the groups as well.
So you touched on two things which seem at odds to each other, but you wove that together perfectly. How do we do something at scale? But how do we
Mhm.
also not forget about the intimacy and individuality of groups, right? Because when you do something at
Mhm.
scale, obviously we're all trying to be efficient and collect more data and go faster, better insights. But sometimes I think that comes at the expense of losing truly the voice and experience
Mhm.
of a particular group and making that group feel engaged with and important and seen. And so I love the cadence that you guys have weekly. I think that is a fantastic structure. Not that it's the only way that you interact, but when you get someone used to a relationship, the expectation is there. So thank you,
Yeah.
Jeff, Ashley. That great answers. That's exciting stuff to be able to talk with and see truly organically what these important groups and members are saying and experiencing. Um, this is for all three of you. Ashley, maybe we'll stay with you since you just kind of had the last answer there. But then Jeff and Beth would love to hear from you as well. How do you ensure that the feedback you collect translates into tangible changes that improve member experience, right? Sometimes you collect data and
Mhm.
you have data and then you have actual change and you have to connect those things. Otherwise, what's the data in service of? So if you could talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that, I'd love to hear about that.
That's definitely so I work within a larger consumer experience team. And so it's something that's not only relevant to me, but also within our team of 12 people. We're always trying to make sure that these recommendations and insights that we're sharing with business owners are followed up on and actions actually taken. So something that I did implement for my community work in the last 3 years, I believe, is I do send out a survey that's really short to the business owner about 3 months after the research is done, just to have them follow up with me and let me know what action has been taken, what their plans are with the insights. Have they been able to take any action on the recommendations that we made? How can our team assist further? And then, as needed, I'll follow up throughout the next 6, 12 months just to see what's sort of going on within those projects and processes. It's a very big enterprise, and so it can be easy to lose sight of things. And so I find just sort of keeping a tracker and keeping up to date with what happens with our research helps make sure that it actually does make a difference throughout the company.
Yeah. Yeah. And not happening in a vacuum, right? I mean,
Mhm.
insights happen and then strategies shift and the landscape shifts, et cetera. So there is kind of a constant
Yeah.
need to keep up. I love that you do that. It makes a lot of sense. Jeff, thoughts from you about how you're doing that?
Yeah, I think what Ashley said is really great. I love the idea of a follow-up survey, even just to get some, qualitative feedback that you can use. I mean, we all have to go out and justify these tools and these resources, right? And it's really hard in a research and a customer experience standpoint if, to justify all of this if nothing gets changed. So getting that information from the organization, even if a change wasn't made, did it impact their decision to not make a change? Like how do you justify not making a mistake, right? So I love that idea. I think what I would add to it is what we try to do is get a lot of information up front. So we've created what we call a research, intake form, which is basically just a series. It's a short survey. Who's the executive sponsor for this? Who's the stakeholders? Who's making decisions? What is the business purpose for this? What change are you thinking you're going to make? And so we ask everybody to fill this out before we really accept, a project. And then I would say the other part of that is I don't think you can underestimate the importance of just networking and building relationships within an organization. So you can
Sure.
follow up, in a very casual way, whether it's in a meeting or running into somebody, in a Zoom meeting or in the office and just trying to build that relationship around, trying to figure out, hey, did what we produced, did it work? Was it useful? My favorite thing, or I tell people this all the time, if I deliver something to you and you come back and say, Jeff, this was worthless and it did nothing for me, I would say, that's great. That's awesome. Tell me more, right? I want to know, like, how could it have been better? How could we have, given you something that you could have used? Like, what went wrong? Because that's where we
Yeah.
are. We're a
Yeah.
support and a resource for the organization. But we probably try to set that more up on the front end and then probably do more casual follow up on the back end. But I love Ashley's idea of just kind of formalizing that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think both of you, what you're talking about is a partnership in a lot of ways, right? I mean, I'm sitting here working with both of you and our other clients, and same kind of answer for me. If something's not useful or you're pivoting, so helpful for me to understand so that I can be better as a partner to say, okay, great, let's retailer these tools or this approach because it's not, you don't set a strategy and then it never changes, right? We're always kind of evolving that. So I love the constant dialogue that both of you have, and appreciate that because I think from my view, I take the same thing. Beth, do you have any other thoughts on how you ensure feedback you collect translates into tangible changes that improve member experience for clients that you're working with?
Yeah, I think Ashley and Jeff both had great points with communication and open relationship and being able to give, feedback, whether it's positive or constructive, either way, super helpful too. I love the idea you had, Ashley, of having that survey of the feedback loop internally as well. I think that's super important. I think, Jeff, to your point, if there is no additional feedback, quote quote of what they're looking for, totally fine. But also, I think as a researcher, we also get so excited when there is like, a catalyst. A research project becomes a catalyst for more research that you're digging into and being able to say, hey, this feedback that we have actually did spur a bunch of questions or a bunch of changes that we want to make. And like that excites me as a researcher. So love that the communication can happen internally with what your stakeholders you're talking to. You're having the, maybe even difficult conversations. And then, like you mentioned earlier, Jeff, kind of showing that back with your communities in an infographic or a newsletter or something like that to say, hey, your impact on this XYZ, survey or IDI perhaps, made this change in the business. And that does bring the members back to have, they're motivated to give you your feedback. They want to see that their voices are heard. So I agree with what they said. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I could just add something, Jay, I think
please.
just to kind of, Beth said something that really sparked what an approach that we've used where when we produce research, we try to answer the questions that the business is asking, but then we also try to say, here's some other things that we found that we think would be good to investigate further, right? Here's some additional pieces of research that we could do that we think would help add some color, add some context. Here's an insight that you weren't even looking for that we think would be interesting to look at. And so we try to put that stuff inside of our content as well, just to keep people thinking about, again, we try to have a continuous conversation with our members in the community, but we also try to find a way to have a continuous conversation with the business as well, so that doesn't die, just because we handed you the PowerPoint doesn't mean that we're done.
I think, Jeff, well said. And also it makes me think about that kind of journey and engagement that you had originally described with how you're taking with your members. And it strikes me that having that conversation over time and that relationship over time is very much in service of exactly what you just said, because it's not just insights out of context in a moment of time, but it's truly understanding engagement through time, which then obviously you're looking forward to see how things are changing, and where you need to pivot. I mean, I think as generally as researchers or as insights professionals, there's a baseline of curiosity that we all have. So we're constantly asking questions. Well, if this, then this, we should explore that, which I think is probably one of the most fun parts of the job, but also a great way to kind of continue to pepper ideas and be good partners, both from us to you, from you to the business, and ultimately trying to understand the consumer better. So I love those answers. Let's maybe get into some examples here, a little bit more tangible. So Jeff, Ashley, probably particularly for you, can you share an example of how some of the insights that you've collected from your members have directly impacted how you then approach member engagement? Ashley, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah. I think so. For this example, I like this project because it was able to show. I had some really good physical examples I could bring back to the members about changes that they helped make. And this also deals with one of those small groups that I was mentioning earlier. But a couple of years ago, I had a business owner come to me who had concerns that some of our upcoming materials about Narcan were possibly going to be triggering to members who struggle with addiction. These these materials were showing an illustrated syringe on them. And this business owner was worried that that could be triggering to someone who has struggled with addiction. So we decided to take this project to Circle, knowing that it was going to be a difficult subject. But we do conveniently have a substance use disorder group on our community, which I keep referring to as Circle. So you've probably put this together by now. It's actually about 200, 300 members, depending on the time of year. But it is not only made up of those who have dealt with addiction, it is also those who have a friend or family member that do. But we ended up doing a survey with this group that walked them through a variety of images of syringes. And so we had photographs of them, we had illustrated syringes, we also had photographs where they were being used by a physician. And what we learned through this survey was that all of these images were triggering, not just the ones of the syringe being used, but even those that were really cartoony images of syringes. And so this led to CareSource pulling back on materials that were getting ready to be sent out for regulatory approval. And those were edited. So I believe they changed it to show a RX prescription for Narcan. So a little cartoon of that rather than a syringe. But it also determined that moving forward, CareSource would not use any of that imaging in materials at all moving forward. And that was a really nice project because we were able to show what that was going to look like versus how it ended up looking in the end, which was a big change to the material. And it just made a huge change for all these years that have passed since then. So it was a really exciting project. We did use a trigger warning on this. So with a lot of projects for that substance use disorder group, we will talk about what they are going to see in the research so they can decide if it's something that they're comfortable with. We also do add resources and things like that when we do this type of triggering content. So we try to be as thoughtful as possible when we do anything like that.
Yeah, that's a great example, Ashley.
Yeah.
And I think wonderful, obviously, research to understand maybe within a smaller group before we go out. That's kind of the purpose before we go out to kind of mass market. But also coming back to, I don't want to come back to this too much, but I just think it's so essential that the relationship that you've built with folks in Circle maybe is a little bit more of a safe space. So when we're worried about triggering someone and we're worried about not wanting to offend or have adverse kind of reactions or something that they're internalizing, it's a little bit nicer to do that in a safe space. So when you've got 200-300 members that you're engaging with or in this community, and that this is a trusted place and a safe space for me to speak, hopefully we're kind of limiting some of that, the result of the trigger. And then obviously we go into market. I mean, the impact of that I think is obvious and great, right? But it's nice that you've got that engagement to really dive in and ask some serious and hard questions about subjects that aren't easy, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jeff, how about you? Examples that you can think of, insights, and how they've impacted member engagement?
Yeah, I think I mean the biggest thing, there's two things really that come to mind for an exact, project. We deal with life insurance, and we sell that primarily to aging adults. And so it's an interesting product from a customer experience standpoint because the customer experience is for the beneficiary, not for the person who takes out the policy. So when we try to do research on what that experience is like, it can be really difficult because we're asking people to talk about a time where they were a beneficiary, a time when, this could be possibly the worst time of their life, but we really want that feedback because we want it to make it as seamless and as effortless as possible. And so we've gone out and been able, just like you said, like been able to ask those questions to the members because we have that relationship with them, and it does give us a little bit of an idea of, okay, how should we ask this question? Is this too sensitive of a topic? Like, can we even go down this road? And that has led to, for us, probably the biggest source that we get information from is from discussion boards. And not to do a shameless plug for Fuel Cycle AI, but
Go ahead, Jeff.
the check is in the mail, right, Jay? Like, yeah, we work this. Yep.
Yes, right.
But it really has been a game changer for us because our members love discussion boards. They have conversations with each other. They have conversations with us, and we just have to throw the question out there, and then people give us all sorts of information. And so that has been probably the biggest source of information that we've been able to get from our community.
Yeah. Jeff, I mean, shameless plug, thank you for that. But also, that is a topic personally, maybe we'll get to it in some Q&A stuff. We're starting to talk about qual at scale, these ideas of taking really kind of rich, deep, colorful insights, qualitatively, discussions, etc., and actually being able to do something. So you mentioned Fuel Cycle AI, obviously being able to kind of hack that up and come up with analysis and themes and the tools as researchers that we need to do our jobs quicker. So one of my favorite topics just in today's market is kind of qual at scale and using AI. So thank you for the nice lead in, Jeff. I appreciate both of the answers. Those are great insights. We'll move on to our next one. Beth, maybe I'll start with you for this one. Thinking about innovative methods, technologies that you're using with your clients to overcome challenges in capturing diverse member voices in research. We talk a lot about that, particularly in healthcare, diverse member voices, and that's very important and not traditionally easy. So would love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So with, I sit on top of our entire healthcare vertical, so I can see a lot of what our clients do. And one of my favorite things in having those conversations is really encouraging clients to use a variety of tools to hit as many members as possible. One of my favorites is like our asynchronous qualitative tool that we have. If you're thinking about a survey as an example, survey 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. When you're looking for such a specific audience, like physicians or nurses, they don't have 10 or 15 minutes to sit down and take a survey. So what I love about our async qualitative tool is, you can ask 1 to 2 questions, and they can answer in 60 seconds or less than 2 minutes, and between patients or on their super fast lunch break. It's a super valuable audience that I know a lot of our clients want to talk to and have those conversations, hear their feedback. But also it's an audience that doesn't have a lot of time. So in instances where we have, we want the feedback, but we don't know, how to reach these folks, as an example, I really, really enjoy having the conversations about how to have the async qualitative, opportunity for this audience to share their feedback. And as another shameless plug, what we hear from a lot of our clients is, being able to take the qualitative videos, the highlight reels, the clips, and sharing that directly with their stakeholders, sharing that directly with their C-suite, with their exec team, is a super, super powerful tool. They can hear, the inflection in their voices. They can see their faces. They can see, and hear, either the joy or the pain points that they're going through. So being able to take that clip as well, and that, the quick, innovative, the qual tool, and sharing that directly with their feedback with the stakeholders has been, very, very powerful for our clients. And I love hearing the feedback they get. And it has led to, board meetings and having those clips shared, or leadership meetings. So that's one of the ways that I really encourage is, a unique audience that I would imagine that for this group here is super interested in talking to physicians, nurses, etc. That's just one way that I've encouraged our clients to reach that audience, and in a way that's also super easy with, tech on the go. Everyone's got their phone in their pocket, so it's a low lift for the nurses, the physicians, again, as an example, but it's a really high reward for our clients.
Yeah, and I think a good point from both the the audience, the member, the consumer that we're talking to, but then also the stakeholder and business partner that we're delivering to, really focusing on meeting them where they're at, right? So how are people best engaging? Not everyone, no one's taking paper surveys anymore. Not no one, but very few people are taking, paper surveys anymore on the go. Beth, you talked about insights, meeting people where they're at, but then also how you deliver that data and the insights to the business. You said a PowerPoint, and everyone knows that kind of just that gets shelved somewhere, right? So how do you really highlight something that's digestible for a quick moving stakeholder who's maybe not invested in all the details and needs to know what I need to know to kind of move on, right? So I love that. Jeff, would love to hear from you. Ashley, if you've got anything to add as well, would love to hear from either of you about methods or technologies that you're using to kind of overcome some of these challenges.
Yeah, I think Beth hit on it. Is, we try to really triangulate findings, and I think it starts with the ask from the business. One of the things that we've really tried to train the business on is don't come to us with a survey. You can, but you don't have to. Come to us with a problem, because we try to maintain a set of tools that we can, cobble together to give you an answer. That might be a survey for part of it. It might be a discussion board for part of it. It might be video qualitative. It might be just outside research from somewhere else, that we can pull in. It might be from something that we've done already previously. So I think having that mentality of not, not walking into it thinking, well, I'm going to do this one thing and that's going to give us the answer. I think we really try to figure out not only who we're hearing from, but who we're not hearing from. And so I would also say that a big approach for us this next year that's going to help with that is we're really trying to integrate the data from our customer database into Fuel Cycle so we know exactly who those people are. We know what policies they have, we know how long they've been customers, and that's going to really help us identify within our audience, who's there, but most importantly, like who's not there, and then how are we going to go out and get that information?
Yeah, Jeff, I feel like you're touching on the idea of kind of holistic insights, which really comes from consolidation. Audience consolidation, because you want to talk with everyone and also know where your gaps are, but then also kind of methodological consolidation, because if you're just asking surveys, you're going to miss something that you might get from a more qualitative approach as you're talking about. So you really start to get consolidation, I think, equals in a lot of ways holistic 360 insights. I mean, which is kind of the pinnacle, what we're all trying to get to. So that's a topic that I hear a lot about with our clients, and we're all trying to solve that. So I think that's great that you're putting that into play. I'll go to our next question. Ashley, if you have anything to add on that, we can start with you. So then we'll go to our last kind of question before we'll wrap it up, and want to give a little bit of time for Q&A and also make sure that everyone's got time to get to their next meeting. So we'll end a few minutes early. But can you share an example of how you've tackled, maybe something that's particularly complex research-wise, like a complex research challenge, and what the outcome was?
Yeah, I think a project that would be a good example for this. This was another project where I had a business owner come to me, really hoping to learn about the hurdles that our CareSource members were going through when they had to go through annual Medicaid redetermination. So this is a process every year where members have to resubmit to get their next 12 months of Medicaid approved, their eligibility for that. And it is known to be very cumbersome, very confusing. It can lead to the members having to make multiple trips to the Department of Job and Family Services. But it's a bit tricky to get feedback on in real time because it's a ongoing rolling process throughout the year. It's not something that just happens, say, in November. And so we decided to try to tackle this on CareSource Circle by putting up a screener and seeking members that had recently gotten their renewal letter from the Ohio Department of Medicaid, letting them know that they needed to go through redetermination. And then we asked those members if they would be willing to participate in a project for about a month that we did as a diary project. And so we set up discussion boards for 12 members that were private, just between them and the moderator. And they were asked to check in, I believe, 4 different times throughout this process. So when they got the letter, when they called, if they went in person, when they finally finished the process. And we kind of went back and forth on if we wanted to do it as the discussion board, but we picked that because this allowed the moderator to get in and probe for more information, really deep dive one-on-one with that member to see where the hurdles were, what was confusing, what could have been done better. It did allow in some cases for us to provide some guidance too, which was helpful for our members. But because of that, we were able to put together a really good picture of how this month-long process went for these members and how it turned out. And while that does seem like a very small sample, it was still really informative. And it was something that CareSource actually ended up later sharing with Ohio Department of Medicaid that they really appreciated and that they used to make some improvements to the communications that they send out to members for the redetermination process. So sometimes, even when it is not the largest collection of members, it can still be really meaningful research.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Ashley, again, I feel you got like a great balance between kind of the scalable, we all want kind of numbers and the confidence in that, but we also want intimacy and true voice of our consumers. I love that example, and really the one-on-one, going back again to kind of the safety of that conversation,
Yeah.
to really kind of get out what someone's experiencing. I love that. Beth, any thoughts from you, and Jeff obviously as well, any thoughts on to kind of close this out, kind of taking complex research challenges and the outcome of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. So one project that comes to mind was for one of my clients that was trying to roll out a new app. And one of the key criteria for this app is that it had to be functional and useful for physicians and patients together. So something that was really unique about this opportunity was that we conducted a series of iterative IDIs. So if you can imagine, on the calendar, we have, we would have IDI sessions with physicians and participants, members as well, to begin. And then they would have 2 or 3 weeks in between. And during that 2 or 3 weeks, they would make the changes to the app design itself. And then they would go for another round of IDIs. But then that next round, they would also pull in 2 or 3 folks from the previous round to then give the feedback on the changes that have been made, as well as pulling in new folks. So they went through a few rounds of this to really kind of focus on the feedback that was given and making sure that the changes are being met, that everything's moving along in the right direction, and then also getting feedback from new participants as well, which is super helpful. So with the result of everything, they were able to incorporate feedback really quickly. They met the needs for both patients and the physicians within the same app, which was a key criteria for the launch of this app. And it really improved the experience for both groups. So it was a win for sure.
Great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'll start to wrap it up for the sake of time and Q&A. Any other comments from anyone before going into my wrap up, and then we'll get into Q&A? Okay. Well, thank you for joining, the three of you. Great insights into just the evolving world of healthcare insurance, talking some about the strategies that you're employing to enhance member experience. That's what this is all in service of. So I love connecting it to that end goal. And then obviously I think we've seen through here, and we've talked a little bit in our conversation about the ability to understand and respond to member needs is more critical and probably even more challenging, to be honest, than ever before. It's just such a focus. So would love to wrap things up a little bit kind of from the fuel cycle end, and then everyone who's attended, again, thank you, and we'll get to Q&A here in a few minutes. So I just want to, for those of you who are maybe unaware, kind of Fuel Cycle's role in this, how we try to partner with our companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield, our partners here, CareSource, Physicians Mutual, dozens of other clients. We want to meet these challenges head on. We are in service of meeting the needs of our clients and the market. And we do that really through two main ways, which I'll unpack a little bit. Software and services for our clients to build out, boards of kind of advisory boards of any audience, but customers, members, brokers. We've talked about some of these audiences today. And fundamentally, that's a technology play from a fuel cycle perspective. We talked about data consolidation, methodological consolidation, so that we get a fuller and richer view of our customers, which is what we're all after. And then also for Beth and I, we also have a service layer of this that we really aim to be consultants. So Jeff, Ashley, you were talking about kind of understanding the business, and for us also to understand the business so that we can partner and provide better services and even consultation about how to use the wide array of tools that are available to us. And that really is, because of the Fuel Cycle platform from our perspective, we've got tools. We've talked about some of these, obviously AI, but qualitative, quantitative, kind of advanced analytics, but then also really quick touches, right? Because we want to get all of the member voice in every form and engage with them. Even things like social listening, right? Jeff, you're talking about pulling in maybe some of your internal data. We just want as much data as possible to make better decisions. And that's ultimately data-driven decisions, right? Because we want confidence in that. And then also, I think personalizing, we've talked a little bit about personalizing that toolkit. So if you've got a bunch of tools, you don't just always use the hammer. Sometimes a job requires a unique set of tools. So I think want to have the ability to tailor those strategies, whether it's either the audience. Ashley, you talked a little bit about maybe from the audience perspective. Jeff, you've kind of talked about how we use different tools to get to richer insights, ultimately to build trust with our customers, long-term loyalty, higher satisfaction. And then last kind of two ways Fuel Cycle is really trying to accomplish this is also trying to make the complex simple. As we barrel into the future with more data and more technology, it's wonderful to have a huge aperture and get it all in, but it becomes very messy and complex. So we want to ensure, obviously, in line with, privacy regulations, that notorious challenges, right, that we all face, particularly in healthcare, a lot of red tape. We want diverse member representation. We talked about that. And so we want to simplify those complexities and bring them to bear in one place so we can get to decisions quicker, but then also pivot as the market and industry kind of dictates. And then lastly, I think the point that for me, I think is personally most exciting about Fuel Cycle is really that seamless connection between insights and execution. Ashley, I think you had mentioned that in the beginning. We've got a whole bunch of data, and then we actually have business needs. And so how do you kind of utilize everything we've talked about to collapse that so that we're actually, and Jeff, you talked about with your business, you don't like it? Great. You like it? Great. Tell me more so I can be a better partner, and we want to be, a better partner for you. And lastly, I love my job because of this sort of conversation. I love working with our clients. Idealistically, I want to help shape the future of healthcare and healthcare insurance and represent our member voices really well. And that ultimately leads to member satisfaction. So I guess this will be my shameless plug for anybody who's joined. If you've got a question, if you've got a challenge, if anything has resonated with you here today, I'd love to talk. We don't do everything at Fuel Cycle. We do a lot. We don't do everything. I'd love to hear about it, love to talk and see if we can help you. So again, thank you for everyone who's joined. And with that, I'm going to open up to questions. And then, we'll kind of pitch it to some of our panelists here. They're the experts. So I'm going to find some questions here in the Q&A. Okay, great. All right. So first question, how do you balance the need for rich, actionable insights with the constraints of data privacy regulations in healthcare research? That's like the question of the day. That's a good one. Does anyone want to take that, the balance for rich, actionable insights, but then also kind of the regulations that we all deal within?
Well, I think, unfortunately, my answer might be pretty boring. But I think from what you ask standpoint, so what we're trying to get from our community is to be very sensitive about that, and try not to pull in specifics. Also with integrating data, you got to be careful about what you pull in and what you're telling them, those profiling points that you pull in. But to us, it's really about making sure that your vendor partner, that you trust them from a security standpoint, and then to also have a great relationship with your compliance and legal departments internally, right? So I think anytime any researcher, I would say the first thing you should always have somebody from legal or compliance involved, in your projects or the setup of your community from the beginning, because ultimately they're going to be the ones that are going to help guide that. So personally, we don't, sit down and manage that. We have some things that we do within the research that we produce, but we rely heavily on our partners, both internally and externally.
Yeah, I would chime right in on that point. I would say my relationships with our regulatory and our legal team have gotten very close over the last few years. Anytime we want to add members from another state into our community, we have to go through a pretty long process. I think with Indiana, it ended up taking us 2 years to gain approval. And we work very, very closely with those regulatory teams as they work with the state. And we just foster really good connections within those Medicaid departments in the state as well. Not myself, obviously, but higher ups within CareSource manage that part of it. And just try to have a lot of transparency about the community, what it is, how it works, what we are going to be doing with that data. And then we build a lot into our privacy policy. So it is very clear what the members are agreeing to be doing. And then we make sure that we are reiterating that when they join the community and first sort of get to know the cadence and what's going on. We reiterate what we're using it for. And I would say that transparency and those relationships are the backbone of the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I mean, both of you kind of talked about compliance, security, not always the funnest topic, but necessary. I feel like I've spent countless hours of my life with all of these regulations and policies, but all in service of trying to get, a member engagement that is upfront, that is clear, so we can continue to move. So a necessary thing, and something obviously we all are very invested in to make sure that we're staying compliant and we can get to that trust and the intimacy, Ashley, that you're talking about. Okay, Beth, we have a question for you in the chat from Nicole. Have you seen any differentiation in research and member participation success in the healthcare insurance space as it relates to the company choosing to be blinded to their community or having their company name known in the community? Great question, Nicole. That is a very good question. Beth, I'll let you take that.
Yeah. So thank you, Nicole. So from my experience, there are strategies for both blinded and branded communities. So there's reasons for both. Some clients choose one or the other for different business reasons. Where I have seen good success, particularly as Ashley had mentioned, in branded communities, I think that there is definitely a little bit more of a human aspect of it. And as Jeff mentioned before, having that relationship, knowing who you're talking to, having a meet the team as an example. I think there's definitely benefits to having a branded community for sure. Not that there aren't any with blinded also. There's definitely benefits to each. But if you're trying to make a decision on how to go forward with yours, I would say, or assuming that you might do a community, I would say let's have a conversation to understand, what are your objectives of your community? What kind of questions are you looking to ask? And then from there, we can absolutely help to consult and guide you on, based on your business needs for XYZ, here's what we recommend going forward with.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Beth, and I'll add to that, Nicole. I think one, it probably depends a little bit on the brand and the objectives, like Beth is talking about. A couple ways I think that I consider this as levers. One, if you have a branded space, I think a lot of obvious advantages to that in terms of how you can recruit and loyalty and engagement, all of that. We can also go out and still conduct research in a blinded way with folks that are not in the community, right? We can kind of go for more of an ad hoc approach or take a kind of a side approach in parallel with the branded work. So it kind of depends, I guess, on the emphasis. And then in the blinded space, it becomes a little bit more important to really nail that engagement. So Jeff, you had talked a lot about in one of your first answers of that kind of two-way street. And so when we think about what a person participating in research gets out of it, what's in it for me, it could be compensation. It could be understanding that my voice is making an impact. It could be knowledge or information or access. So there's a variety of different tools that we kind of level up and down depending on the approach to make sure, one, that we're achieving objectives, number one, best point. And then number two, really making sure that how the member is engaging with us is going to be ultimately engaging for them. Yeah. Okay. Let me check. Any other questions? We've got about 9 minutes left. We'll leave a few minutes early. We've all got our 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock meetings. Any other questions from anyone? in the group. Let me pull up the Q&A section here. Tina's comment. Tina, wow, using AI, we turned into a podcast. That is, Tina, you are really on the front edge of AI. I love watching how Quest is utilizing that, and you guys have really embraced that. That's very cool. A podcast. I love that. Okay. I think that those are all the questions. All right. Thank you again, everyone, for spending 50 minutes of your Thursday with us. Jeff, Ashley, Beth, thanks particularly to you for being just great partners to work with, for spending time and sharing the insights and kind of helping all of us hopefully get a little bit better at what we're doing. I think we all want to do that. So with that, I will close our webinar for now. Again, we will send out a recording and appreciate everyone who came, and reach out if you have any questions. Would love to have a conversation with you all. All right, have a great rest of your Thursday and an upcoming weekend. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jeff.